Hello horror hounds. The next station on Blood on the Tracks is the Midnight Meat Train. Please mind the gap between the plot and common sense. I think it's fair to say that Clive Barker's writing has been translated and adapted onto the screen with varying results. The Midnight Meat Train doesn't suffer as some adaptations do from the removal of material from the original source or watering down any of the content or the subject matter. It's a 24 odd page short story that this is based upon. Instead, I think it's an attempt to pad out the story with some lazy cinematic shorthand and some basic characterization that really hampers this. I'll come clean. I've never clicked with the Midnight Meat Train. If you want the film version of the original short story, then watch the first 3 minutes of this. There's 5 minutes slap bang in the middle, and then perhaps the last 10 minutes of the film, and you've got the short story, The Midnight Meat Train. That leaves us with about 80 minutes or so for the rest of the film. For the uninitiated, those of you who haven't read or seen The Midnight Meat Train, first question, why have you clicked on a video called The Midnight Meat Train Movie Review? I hope you're enjoying it. Struggling photographer Leon Kaufman, who's Bradley Cooper in a pre-Hangover fame and pre-Silver Linings Playbook, pre-award-winning Bradley Cooper. His obsessive pursuit of dark subject matter leads him into the path of a serial killer, Mahogany, played by Vinnie Jones. The subway murderer who stalks late-night commuters, ultimately butchering them in the most gruesome ways imaginable. Something we've all seen 100 times before, right? I would respectfully suggest that if the film had managed to stick the ending of the short story, then an awful lot more people would remember this and think of this more favourably. There's something else that this film could have done which would have, I think, secured a much more esteemed place in horror cinema history for it. We'll touch on that maybe a little bit later. This film is directed by a Japanese director, forgive me for reading his name, Ryuhei Kitamura. And one of the things I do genuinely dig about this film is the look of the film. I love the way it's shot, and I love the way it's lit. Whoever his DP was did a fascinating job. One of the strengths of this film, if you go back and rewatch it, if you've already seen it before, is the colour palette. Above ground is autumnal, rich in yellows, bronzes, increasingly gold. And that colour gold comes to represent Leon, Bradley Cooper's character, as well as his girlfriend Maya. Underground, and so the subway, but that also metaphorically for Hades, hell, the underworld, is cold, full of chromes and blues and silvers. It's a nice inversion of the notion of the underworld being fire and brimstone and hot and reds. As Leon gets seduced by this hidden world, you can see the progression of his character mapped out in how he's lit, how the colours associated with him morph from gold to this cold blue, and you can see elements of blue in the background being picked out as the serial killer Mahogany's world starts infecting and invading his own world, and Leon himself moves along from a world of gold to a world of this cold blue, this underworld. It's handled, there's a subtlety and an artistry at play there. There's a character arc in the lighting design there that's so much more subtly handled than the character arc for Leon in the actual script. The script has him jump at one point literally from mildly interested in this butcher character, in this guy that he's accidentally photographed, Mahogany, to off the scale, like straight to 11 maps with pins in them of everyone that's disappeared in New York City. The walls plastered with photographs, dozens and dozens of photographs, the floor covered in photographs that he's taken of this guy. He goes from mildly interested to wacko stalker obsessed in between scenes. The problem there is with the script by a guy called Jeff Bueller. He doesn't really attempt nuance or character. There's an awful lot of what I would describe as cinematic shorthand. So loads of photographs up on the wall, pins in mat equals obsessed, right? I'm gonna tell you that this guy is obsessed rather than show you, because he's going to portray all the classic symptoms of obsessed characters from the movies that you've all seen. So you're all on board, right? He's obsessed. Okay, let's go. There are things about this movie that I should absolutely love at the time, in a world of PG-13 horror movies with all the sharp corners shaved off so you don't hurt yourself, all the sharp edges blunted so you don't accidentally cut yourselves on these horrible movies. This is a full-throated, full-blooded, this is a blood and guts movie. Kitamura moves his camera around with the kind of panache that in previous videos you will have seen me praising the likes of Dario Argento for. So why is it so hard for me to get on board with this? I've seen people criticize this movie as an MTV style movie. MTV style really, I think, is about overproduction and over editing, hyper editing. And that's not a fair accusation to level against this movie. There are an awful lot of long shots and tracking shots. This is not an ADD movie, an ADHD movie. This is not a hyperactive movie. This is not an MTV style movie bouncing off the ceiling on E numbers. This is a very well made movie. I think it's the CG. I'll be honest with you. I think it's the computer generated stuff. And there are some things in the movie that are computer generated that help the movie, and there are other things that really hurt the movie. Being able to rattle around and through the train, or the train moving towards you and then around you and stuff like that. I like that stuff. The train is a real rattling, thundering beast in the cavernous tunnels underneath the city, and for all of these train-themed movies we've been talking about, this is the first one where the train in and of itself feels like a threat. Being inside it and trapped in it as it's rattling and moving around at high speeds works fantastically well. There's a POV shot, a point of view shot from one of the victims as she's getting dragged down the train carriage and then hit with the hammer and decapitated, all from her POV as the head rolls along and then we pull back. That is fucking insane. That would be the signature shot of a Dario Argento movie. And the trouble is that is crammed into a movie that's full of CG blood, which ages the film horribly, full of CG augmented kills that may have seemed shiny and nice new bright toys in 2008, but almost a decade later just fail to impress and look, they don't look good. It's highlighted it all the more in an incredibly effective sequence that uses practical cadavers with just tiny little CG touches here and there, I presume. Mahogany's prepping the bodies, clipping their hair, removing their teeth, removing their nails, and in one of the most squicky scenes I've seen in a long time, removing their eyeballs with all the trailing gloop and nerves that come after it. It's one of them. It just looks amazingly realistic because there's really stuff there. The other thing the film could have done that I mentioned earlier, which would have raised its place in the history of cinema, if it had gone so practical, if it had gone more practical, really gone for it. CG blood looks bad. CG blood has never, ever looked good. And this film is awash with blood, but it's awash with fake blood. And you only have to watch a TV series like Ash versus Evil Dead to know how much fun you can have in literally just drenching someone in act. I'm going to use the phrase actual fake blood, which I know is a moronic. It sounds a little off, but you know what I mean by actual fake blood. You're actually drenching someone in a liquid that looks like blood, rather than putting CG blood in afterwards. Anyone who's watched Ash versus Evil Dead or any of the Evil Dead movies will know what kind of a kick and what kind of a visceral reaction you can get from just drenching someone in this shit. And not only that, the actors react to it. Let's try and illustrate my point. Midnight Meat Train and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre are both films wherein human beings are treated like cattle. Both of them involve bludgeoning people with hammers, and both of them involve hanging people up on hooks. So compare the stylized approach in Midnight Meat Train to the matter-of-fact, rustic, almost rusty approach in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you've got the contrast there between the approach that should have been taken, I think, and the approach that was taken. I'm going to pare it down even further for you. The spikes and the hammers that you see in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you can picture them right now, can't you? And this is the hammer in the Midnight Meat Train. That's a pretty spot-on rendition of it, and the hooks are exactly the same. They're nice and shiny and chrome. And the Midnight Meat Train is nice and shiny and chrome, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is sort of it's down and dirty. So approaching this, I knew that Midnight Meat Train, I knew I'd never clicked with it. I knew it wasn't one of my favourite Clive Barker adaptations, but I hadn't read the short story either. So before rewatching the film, and I probably enjoyed it more on this rewatch than I have any other time I've watched it, I read the short story first to see if there was anything I could get. Hand straight up, this the short story, The Midnight Meat Train. It's the first one after the prologue in volume 1 of the Books of Blood, and it's not a top tier Clive Barker piece of writing. In that story, Kaufman, an accountant, a loner, a very sort of uninteresting guy, falls asleep on a midnight train, and when he wakes up, there are people being butchered in the carriage beyond. He tries to hide from, and then gets into a fight with the killer. Then the train comes to its final end destination. Kaufman had moved to New York with an idealized idea of what New York is, and the city of New York beat that out of him, and he became very disillusioned with the city and the idea of what New York was. What he finds at the end of that train track is that people are being killed to feed to cannibalistic humanoid characters that turn out to be the original founders of the city. But beyond that, there is a larger beast, a sort of super beast that they are serving, and the implication is that New York was founded on and around this beast, and in order to keep the machinery of the city going, in order for the city to live, the beast must live and must be fed. And the wider implication there is that every major city around the world is founded upon some sort of ever-living creature that has to feed on some of the population for the rest of the city to function. The purpose of the story is what's left, what's unexplained. You're left with a full stop and a scenario that you never would have dreamt of at the start of the story, which sounds like a sort of hokey serial killer thing. You're left with the ramifications of the revelation at the end. The climax of the movie, for one, completely leaves out this notion of a super beast. There are just creatures under the city that have to be fed to keep the two worlds separate, the world above ground and the world below ground. And the climax of the movie leaves you asking many more logistical questions and picking apart the setup of everything that you've seen before, rather than being left to mull over the ramifications of what's just been revealed to you. You'll have to go, well, hang on a minute. So how many people are being killed a night? And that times 365 nights a year, all on the same train line, and no one's going to do this. So how many people have to be involved in the conspiracy, and why this, why? Whereas at least with the short story, the payoff is that Kaufman, as soon as he sees this super beast, as soon as he has this Damascene moment where he looks at this creature beyond all imagining, he sees the face of the city. The creature, the beast beneath New York is New York. And like, it is a Damascene moment, it is a road to Damascus moment for him. And he does fall down on his knees and volunteers to be the new butcher in service of the city whose true face he has now seen. Whereas with Bradley Cooper's character, he becomes the new butcher because the plot needs him to become the new butcher. I know a lot of people are left wondering what the fuck the creatures are at the end of the film, because there's really no explanation given. I don't think there needs to be an explanation given, as long as there's a thematic resonance for them. And at the end of the film, they are the ultimate what the fuck. What the fuck are they? Are they cannibals? Are they monsters? Are they aliens? What the fuck? It's just a what the fuck, rather than being thematically pleasing. Kaufman in the short story has an idea of what New York is. The supposed reality of New York is a disappointment to him until he sees the true face of New York, and he is transfigured and becomes the butcher. So we don't have to have what that creature is explained to us, because it works thematically. Plonking some creatures at the end of your film, which is about a serial killer, and they're going, hey, surprise, it's all about a conspiracy and some creatures. Anyway, have a nice night, everyone. Safe journey home. You get whiplash from the gear change. So what you're left with is the story of a photographer who has obsessive tendencies, becoming obsessed with a guy he's coincidentally bumped into, that he links to a murder victim that he coincidentally bumped into the night before. Whereas we should have spent time, I believe, on Leon becoming seduced by the secret face of the city. Brooke Shields is the art gallery owner who challenges him, if you want to be great, go darker. All the times that you stopped and went back, step forward, and he takes on that challenge and starts seeing a different side to the city revealed to him. His journey should have been one of seduction. The Brooke Shields character is very interesting, and she could have been a gatekeeper to this darker side of the city, like a tempter, with thematic links there of temptation and seduction from the Hellraiser movies. And she could have started him on this journey of seduction to this underworld that he would have followed further and further, and ultimately that would have brought him to Mahogany the Butcher, and ultimately the end of the line, literally and metaphorically, with the true face of the city. That said, the DVD is worth owning if you're a fan of Clive Barker. There's a 15-minute special feature on here, which there's a few minutes of Barker talking about this, and then there's about 10-12 minutes at his home in his art studio with him talking about painting and his paintings, which is absolutely fascinating. I will see if someone's put that piece on YouTube and linked to it. There's a commentary with Barker and Kitamura talking about their experiences. They're both very eloquent men. Actually listening to the commentary track and them talking about the fights and the struggles that they went through getting this film made, and then not having it released and then dumped, was much more interesting than watching the movie. We've got 2 more films left for Blood on the Tracks, and you will be pleased, all of you gorehounds, to know that they too both involve people being eaten, people who get on trains being eaten. Hold tight then, because the next stop is creep.